Hello Refine Code community, Marta Locklear here with a new edit video for you. Today we're going to take a look at this beautiful editorial shoot by Katie Mary, and we're going to go ahead and use the Refine Types Katie Mary collection on these edits. We haven't done one for Katie in a while, and we thought it was due to get one done for you guys. You seem to love these edit videos. So let's just go ahead and get started. If you want a deep dive into the collection, I would suggest taking a look at our inside Refine Types Katie Mary video we have here. I'll try to link it in this video as well for you, so it's an easy access. That will do a deep dive into the ins and outs of all of this, but instead for this video, I just want to go through and do an edit. And we have a good variety of images. We have open, this is full sun technically, but Katie used a scrim on this to create a little more of an open shade. So you can see we do have some sun coming in, but some open shade as well. Same thing with these. We have some interior shots, some lower exposure, just after we got some sun hitting her directly, but it's not quite warm, a little cooler. So quite a variety, some overexposed shots, some in between, and more interior, etc. So we'll go through all of these and take a look at how to approach the edit with them. The first thing I like to do when I start a session is I usually just click through the presets and get an idea of which tones vibe the best with the shoot on hand. If I'm film matching, obviously I would pull up a reference image. I would use the RA, bring in a film scan right here, then click through and pick. But for this situation, we're not matching film. We're just going to do a digital edit for those of you that don't shoot any film. So I'm basically just taking a look at which tones I like with this shoot and give us the best vibe. I'm going to go ahead with Fuji 400H3. I may adjust a little for the interior shots, but I'll probably stick with 3 for all of the exterior just to make sure the tones are consistent through and through. So clicked on Fuji 400H3, and if I need more contrast or depth, that's when you will use the plus version. So that's a personal taste thing. I'm just going to stick with the regular for this situation. And from there, I would just lift exposure to the point that I feel like fits the image. When we first editing for KT, we're kind of in this range, a little more of that really light and airy kind of overexposed that matched her film the best. But over the last few years, everybody's getting a little more true to life and a little more toned down as far as that overexposure. So we're landing somewhere in this point now. I'm going to add a touch of warmth, just kind of keeping an eye on her skin. That's really where I focus when I edit, is I start with the skin tones as far as exposure. I don't like to blow out areas, so I will probably correct that right there. And I base my white balance off on how I want those tones to look. So I'm just pulling a tiny bit of that magenta out right there, and I feel like that looks gorgeous. From there, you can do increase or decrease of contrast, and I'm just going to lift the shadow point. See how that opened her face up just a touch. So I'm just going to lift those shadows a little, and that's really where I would go with this. So that's the edit. And then let's go to the next one. I'm going to try to keep this video from being too long. You can see this one's a little cooler in tone. Same thing, lifting that exposure. And then I'm going to warm up. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little. Let's take a look at her skin. I'm going to warm up a touch, and I'm going to pull a touch of that magenta out. And then just lift those shadows to make sure those black points are not getting too dark. And let a little of that detail, you see we don't see anything here, and that brought in just a hint of detail in her hair. And that looks gorgeous. I think I will bring this down just a couple more. There we go. Same thing, let's use 3. And you can see all the magenta in this one. We're definitely gonna have to pull some of that out. So I'm gonna lift here. Let's zoom in on her skin. You see how much magenta was in the original file. So I'm going to add a touch of warmth in to bring some color into her skin. And I'm going to pull out just a touch of that magenta to bring her olive tones back in. There we go. That looks beautiful. And then from there, like I said, you can kind of hand adjust to taste how you like things. You like more contrast, you can add more in. But really, I think this is looking gorgeous. I'm going to add a little more warmth in there. And there you go. pretty quick. Let's take a look at 3 on these interior shots, but I think I'm going to probably go with a different one. 3, no. I think I'm going to go with 1. It's nice, clean. Still works consistently. Because of the horizontal, I'm going to take off the before and after real quick. I'll go back to it for you guys. I'm going to pull out just a smidge of that warmth to let that crystal really shine. And then again here, pulling up those shadows. So instead of, a lot of people want to do this. And that doesn't look bad, but this really starts getting blown out and distracting. So what you want to do instead is lift it to the point that this is not getting too blown out. And then because of the way we build our tone curve in, I just realized those are all open. It allows you to use your shadow slider as almost like an intensity slider. You can see how that really just allows us to open up that middle without losing the black point and without losing the highlights. So we worked really hard to build a tone curve that gave us that flexibility. So then I was able to really open that up. I'm going to keep it kind of in between though, because I like the mood of this. I want you to feel like it felt like you when you were there. So we don't want to overdo it to take it too far from reality. Let's go ahead and look at that before and after. That looks gorgeous. And we're back outside. This one's definitely a little cooler, so we're going to have to add in some warmth. Go ahead and lift. Let's take a look at that skin. And we're seeing some magenta again in this one. See how that does. Good. Okay. And we're just going to pull, you can see all the magenta in here. So we're just going to pull a tiny bit of that out. And really with our collection, and when you're bouncing from camera to camera, right here is really the main things that you're going to have to adjust. Sometimes different lenses and stuff will need you to adjust the contrast more, but more than not, your main tweaks should be right here in your temperature. And that's the main thing we see a difference from bouncing from camera to camera. So if for this camera, we're seeing a lot more magenta, so we're having to pull a little out. Some you see a lot more green, so you have to put a little magenta in. So really that is the key with the collection. I'm going to pull a tiny bit of that warmth out. All right, and then from here we want to soften up this mood, so you can really keep it here and keep it kind of very authentic in tone. But if you want that light and airy and really that kind of lifted look, we can go somewhere in there. I think that looks gorgeous. I'm going to knock off a little bit of this highlight just to make sure these areas are not blowing out. But look how beautiful that looks. Same thing, open shade, very cool. And a trick for those, let's see if it works on this one, I might not. Yeah, actually pretty good. For people that really struggle with white balance and still learning what you need to do to get a cooler image warm, adding and subtracting magenta and tints, doesn't work on all camera models, but on a good bit of camera models, Lightroom's Auto or Lightroom's Daylight work really good. Actually, Daylight worked better on this one. So Auto gave us a little too much warmth and a little too much green. Daylight actually neutralized that a little bit, and that's a good starting point. You most likely will still need to tweak a little bit, but it gets you a good starting point instead of starting from zero, from scratch, if you're still learning how to see white balance and adjust. So I definitely recommend trying that. There are some cameras or lens combinations where I click on that and either it does nothing or it just way too warm or way too cool. So just test it with your camera and see if that works for you. And same thing, just adjusting the white balance to taste. I'm going to add a smidge of contrast in here because I really want to give this nice depth. And I think we can go a tiny bit warmer. This one's a little trickier in the white balance because of all these greens. And it was very, very blue, as you can see. And there we go. I'm going to bounce this over here and let's take a look at her black and white collection. This is a completely different collection, but I do want to see it in black and white as well. And the dress is definitely blowing. Oh, our exposure is still up. There we go. Pull down those highlights. And you can see the different versions we have here. And I actually like this with the 3200 film grain. Look at that. that really gave us a nice filmy look there. So there's two completely different looks with that same, with the Katie Mary collections. All right, let's get rid of that again. We're gonna go back to 1 since we're inside. And same thing, as soon as we warm up, we get a better white balance. And then adding, see all the green in there? If people click on this, they're like, it's too green. No, you just add a smidge of magenta in there. And I usually try to find a flesh tone, you know, pinks, kind of flesh tones. And I use that as something close to white to really get where I want my tint. And the same thing, exposure and adjusting the shadows to taste. There you go. And back to 3, different girl, different white balance and different exposure. And same thing, gonna warm up to her skin, watching the skin in whites and pulling a smidge of that magenta out. One thing that Katie likes is she doesn't like reds and magentas very much, so I'm always pulling a little bit of that out when I do edits for her. And it just comes from her when she used to shoot fashion back in the day. It's just something that she stuck to, and that's just her personal preferences. Everybody has their things they like to see in their work or don't like to see, and you adjust to it. There you go. Now this one's, she's exposed technically properly, but because of the full sun, this all became a little overexposed. So we're going to have to play with the shadows on this because we're going to have to pull the exposure down. And I forgot we're using 3 on the outside. So as soon as I bring that down, look how much sky we were able to maintain. And then from here, I'm going to lift from the shadows and look at that. Immediately we maintain that sky, but we were able to bring her back out and lighten her up. There you go. And then now we can adjust white balance. So this one's actually leaning a tiny bit green. So we're gonna add a little bit of magenta in on this one. And then if you felt like the blue was too distracting, maybe you liked it a little more neutral and the blue seems distracting, and that's when you can go in, I'm going to add a little more warmth, into your color mixer, go into your saturation, and you can actually pull a little of that out. So say you just wanted a softer version, you could do something like that so it's not quite as electric. But that's beautiful. And 3. Oh, look at that. That was nearly 1 click. Wow, that was perfect. And same thing, pull a tiny bit of that magenta out. And then I'm going to add a touch of vibrant on there. That looks beautiful. 1, lift that exposure, added a touch of warmth. There we go. 1, exposure. Oh. I'm adding a little warmth in because I like the kind of the old world vibe of this, kind of pioneer-esque vibe. I think they called it Ralph Lauren. I'm going to add a little warmth in just to kind of keep that kind of vintage feel to it. There we go. Same thing. So this is one with the white gowns, or this is a pantsuit, obviously. You really want to make sure you're not blowing them out, but I feel like this definitely needs some warmth. A little less magenta. There we go. And then lift from the shadows. And again, I feel like the contrast between the blue and this area is quite stark. So I'm just going to pull back on those blues just a little so you can tell it's blue, but it's not electric. And that way it's a little less distracting. Back inside, we're going with 1, lifting, add in that nice warmth until these become more neutral colors. And then adding in a smidge of magenta to balance out. And then if these greens feel a little electric, they're kind of very vibrant greens. You can see it here in the original. But I feel like they're just looking almost fake. So what I'm going to go is go into the hue, and I'm just going to knock back some of the cyan and warm those greens up a little. And there we go. That looks much better. 3, and again, you can almost leave it right here. And I would just, same thing I've been doing, is pull back a smidge of that magenta. I don't know if we need much more warmth on this. And you can see, here's a perfect example. This is Chad holding the scrim. So she would have this probably edited out or softened just so you can tell what exactly was happening. She sends her images off to a retoucher to do that type of work for her. I usually just handled the color grading, and same thing. Let's go back into that mixer and just knock back these blues just a tiny bit. And you can see the teal here. Now this is very Fuji though to see these colors, but it really just depends on how much you want to adjust. You could just knock that little bit of teal out as well. You see, you can really take all that blue out if you wanted to take it out completely. But I think that looks really good. Same thing, just adjusting white balance to taste. We got some color cast happening here. So I'm going to pull a little bit of that. See how that instantly, if I pull that warmth out. Other images we needed the extra warmth. This one is more warmth, so we're going to pull a tiny bit of that out to help neutralize some of that color cast. And same thing, pulling out a little of the yellow. And then there we go. And I'm going to slightly adjust those greens just a touch. Really don't need to do much this one. It's pretty good white balance and exposure. One click. Pull back on the warmth a little. I'm adding a touch of magenta in there. And I'm going to pull back on these oranges just a touch, just to soften it up. There we go. Full sun. Yeah, I feel like we need to, I'm going to put a little bit of that blue back in there. There we go. And I'm just adjusting the highlights, shadows, contrast. Oh, we're doing 3. Almost forgot. And this one's definitely a little on the cool side, looking at her skin tone. Started off cool and magenta. So we're going to add in a little bit of warmth. Take out a smidge of that magenta. There you go. Back inside. Lifting. A little bit of warmth. And just adjust those greens a tiny bit. There we go. Actually went too far with that. Three. I'm pulling this down a little because I don't want this completely blown out. So I'm going to warm up, and we're going to actually add magenta into this one. And then lift from the shadows and open up the shadow area. let me go back to here so you see it side by side. Here we go. Warm it up. Get that nice sun glow. Get some peachy tones to her skin. Look how purple and blue she was. And immediately we have much more of a peachy tone. Let's look at the shadows. And like I said, you can edit in this range as well. Really just depends on your style. But I'm editing kind of like how KT would want them edited. And then let's knock back these highlights just a little bit. And there you go. There's a look at, oh, wrong one. The images that we just edited. And if you are interested in trying out the Refined Times KT Mary collection, I'll do a link in the description below to our collection. You can check it out on our website. But thank you for watching, and thank you for being a part of the Refine Co community.